My 12-year-old daughter uses a wheelchair. It was our town's big 4th of July parade. She was riding on a pretty float decorated with flags and flowers. She wore a red, white, and blue dress and waved to everyone with a big smile. The crowd cheered loud for her. She was the star of the parade that year. Then Karen from the HOA pushed her way through the crowd to the side of the float. She yelled, "Wheelchairs on floats break safety rules. It ruins the perfect look." People told her to stop and sit down, but Karen got very angry. She pulled a small handgun from her purse. She always carried it for protection. She pointed it up at my daughter on the float and pulled the trigger. A loud bang rang out over the music. The bullet hit my daughter in the shoulder. Blood came fast. She cried out in pain and fell sideways on the float. With tears in her eyes, she looked into the crowd and called, "Daddy, it hurts. Help me." Karen put the gun away and said, "Now the parade will look right." She tried to walk back into the crowd like nothing happened. She did not know that at that exact moment, a black SUV with military plates sped up and stopped right beside the parade route. Out stepped a tall man in dress uniform, my husband, a Navy SEAL who had just flown home early from a long mission overseas to surprise us at the parade. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from. And please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. The morning sun glistened off the parade floats, reflecting off ribbons, flags, and shiny metallic decorations. Laughter, music, and the sounds of cheering filled the town square as families lined the streets for the annual 4th of July celebration. My 12-year-old daughter sat proudly on the front of the parade float, her small wheelchair secured with straps to keep her safe, yet she looked completely at ease. She wore a red, white, and blue dress, her tiny hands waving enthusiastically to the crowd. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, children waved tiny flags, and the crowd's applause roared like a wave, lifting her spirits higher with every passing second. This was her moment. For months, she had been excited to ride on the float, smiling shyly at neighbors and waving at friends from school. People shouted her name, cheering and clapping as she waved back, completely oblivious to the danger that had been creeping toward her that day. The float moved slowly along the main street, the rhythmic beat of drums accompanying the band playing patriotic songs. My heart swelled with pride watching her. She was radiant, the embodiment of joy, innocence, and courage, unaware of the looming shadow that had made its way through the crowd. And then she saw her. Karen, the notorious HOA officer who seemed to make it her life's mission to enforce rules regardless of consequences, stormed through the crowd with a single-minded intensity. Her sharp heels clicked against the pavement as she pushed past bystanders, a scowl etched into her face. "Wheelchairs on floats break safety rules?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the music like a jagged knife. "It ruins the perfect look." People surrounding her shook their heads, murmuring and stepping aside. Some tried to calm her down, but Karen ignored them entirely. Her eyes were fixed on my daughter, and the anger in them was unmistakable. She believed she had the authority to correct what she saw as a violation, no matter the cost. My daughter, startled by the sudden outburst, paused her waving and looked up. I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the cheering crowd. "I didn't mean to break the rules." She shifted slightly in her wheelchair, unsure of what to do. Her small hands gripped the sides tightly, and her bright eyes, so full of hope just moments ago, now widened with fear. The crowd began to murmur nervously. No one expected what would come next. Karen's face twisted in fury. The rules to her were absolute. Obedience to regulations was everything. In her rigid mind, any breach, real or imagined, needed immediate correction, and she always carried a tool for enforcing them. With a swift movement that made the bystanders gasp, she pulled a small handgun from her purse. It gleamed in the sunlight, the metallic barrel catching the parade lights. My heart froze. Time slowed. I could see my daughter's small face, eyes widening in terror as the weapon was aimed directly at her. The loud bang cracked over the music, a sound that froze the crowd mid-cheer. My daughter screamed in pain, clutching her shoulder as blood quickly soaked through her dress. She fell sideways in the wheelchair, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Her lips quivered as she called out, her voice high and desperate, "Daddy, it hurts. Help me." The people around her froze, their own fear reflecting the horror of the moment. Some tried to rush toward her, but the crowd made it impossible. Karen, bizarrely calm after the shot, tucked the weapon back into her purse. She straightened her posture and sneered at the onlookers, saying in a matter-of-fact tone, "Now the parade will look right." She began to step away, merging with the crowd as if nothing had happened. The sheer audacity of her actions sent waves of panic through the street. Parents grabbed their children, some screaming for help, while others dialed emergency numbers frantically. But my daughter was on the float, bleeding, terrified, completely exposed. And that's when it happened. From nowhere, a black SUV with military plates skidded onto the street beside the parade route, tires squealing slightly against the asphalt. The crowd parted instinctively, some thinking it was another parade vehicle. The rear door opened with precision, and out stepped a tall man in full dress uniform. His presence radiated authority and calm simultaneously. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized him. My husband, a Navy SEAL, home early from a long mission overseas, sent to surprise us at this very parade. His eyes scanned the chaotic scene, taking in the bullet wound, my terrified daughter, and the fleeing Karen. Within moments, he moved toward the float with the fluid grace and confidence of someone trained to handle danger in seconds. Bystanders stepped aside, sensing instinctively that this man was in command. My daughter, still trembling, looked up at him through tears, her fear mixed with a glimmer of hope as she realized help had arrived. Karen, frozen in the crowd, saw the Navy SEAL approaching with unmistakable purpose. For the first time that day, the authority she wielded so carelessly was challenged by real skill, experience, and determination. Every second counted. My husband reached the edge of the float, scanning for threats, moving with practiced precision, and then crouched, lifting my daughter carefully into his arms. Her small body trembled against his chest, but the warmth of his uniform and the certainty of his presence began to calm her. Karen took a step back, shocked and angry, realizing, for the first time, that she was no longer in control. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and gasps, witnessing a moment that was both terrifying and heroic. As he carried my daughter to safety, I could see the weight of fear beginning to lift from her shoulders, replaced by relief and trust. The parade continued in slow motion around them, the chaos frozen in time. Police and medics began to swarm in, taking control of Karen and stabilizing the situation. But in that moment, it was just my daughter and her father, the Navy SEAL who had come home early to protect her, against the threat that no parade rule could justify. And as they stepped away from the float, the morning sunlight glinting off the decorations, the reality hit me. Danger had arrived in the form of a person blinded by rules, but protection, love, and courage had arrived even faster. That 4th of July would never be forgotten, not for the fireworks, not for the cheers, but for the moment when true heroism showed its face. The crowd around the parade float had frozen in a mixture of shock and fear. Music, laughter, and applause had vanished in an instant, replaced by murmurs, gasps, and the frantic shouting of bystanders. My 12-year-old daughter lay slumped in her wheelchair, her small frame trembling and soaked in blood from the bullet wound in her shoulder. Her wide eyes darted around the crowd, looking for safety, searching desperately for someone to protect her. Every second felt like an eternity. People were frozen in place, some pointing at the scene, some dialing emergency numbers, while others stared in disbelief. But amid the chaos, one figure moved with unmatched speed, precision, and authority. My husband, my daughter's father, the Navy SEAL. The black SUV with military plates had screeched to a stop beside the float just moments earlier. Its doors opened sharply, and he stepped out in full Dr. S uniform, his posture straight, his gaze scanning the scene with the intensity of a trained warrior. The crowd instinctively parted, sensing his commanding presence. He didn't hesitate, didn't panic, and didn't shout. He simply assessed the threat with a calm, methodical focus that came from years of life and death training overseas. Karen, still standing a few feet away with her handgun concealed but ready, froze as she noticed him. For the first time that day, her confidence wavered, and a flicker of fear crossed her face. He moved toward the float with remarkable speed, navigating through the crowd as if they weren't even there. His eyes never left my daughter. Every step was precise, measured, and purposeful, like a predator calculating the most effective path to protect its prey. The float itself was teeming with people, waving and cheering before the chaos began. Now, it was a gauntlet of frozen onlookers, and yet he moved as if they didn't exist, only focused on the girl in the wheelchair. "Stay back!" someone shouted, but it was unnecessary. No one dared approach. The aura of authority surrounding him was undeniable. He reached the edge of the float in what felt like moments, crouched slightly, and assessed my daughter's position. Her wheelchair was tipped slightly to the side, straps loosened, her small body slumped, but alive. Her breathing was rapid and uneven, her tiny chest heaving with fear and pain. Her red, white, and blue dress was soaked with blood from the bullet wound, a stark contrast against the festive colors of the parade. She looked up at him through wide, tear-filled eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It hurts. Help me." Without hesitation, he extended his arms and lifted her gently yet firmly. His trained hands cradled her small frame, careful not to worsen the injury, while his eyes never left Karen, who was now taking hesitant steps backward, realizing the odds had shifted. The crowd gasped, some cheering, some crying, as they watched the dramatic scene unfold in front of them. He shielded my daughter with his body, turning slightly to place himself between her and any potential threat. Every inch of his being radiated control, power, and protection. Karen's anger and arrogance had vanished, replaced with panic and disbelief. Her hand twitched toward the handgun she had just fired, but she hesitated, clearly realizing that her target was no longer vulnerable. My husband's voice, low and commanding, carried over the noise of the parade. "Drop the weapon. Step back. Now." It wasn't a question. It was an order, an absolute command from someone trained to handle life-or-death situations. Karen froze, her lips quivering, the weight of authority pressing down on her. For the first time that day, she had no power over the situation. He moved toward the parade's edge with my daughter in his arms, carefully navigating the narrow space between floats, onlookers, and decorations. Medics, who had arrived moments earlier, met him halfway. Their faces reflected relief, knowing that the most critical part, getting her safely from immediate danger, was already accomplished. They took the stretcher he held open, and he carefully transferred her onto it. His hands lingered briefly, reassuring her that she was safe, that he would not let anything happen to her. She clung to him for a few moments, her tiny hands gripping his uniform, before allowing herself to be moved by the medics. The crowd erupted into applause and murmurs of admiration. People whispered about the Navy SEAL who had just appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, and saved a child in the middle of a parade. Some recorded videos, some knelt to assist, but everyone knew that the moment they had witnessed was extraordinary. Karen was restrained by police officers, her face a mix of rage, disbelief, and defeat. She struggled, shouted, and tried to assert herself, but no one paid attention. Her attempt to enforce rules had been crushed in an instant by the presence of someone who truly understood authority and protection. I ran to my daughter, tears streaming down my face, as the medics checked her wound. Her small body trembled, but the sight of her father, the man who had flown across the world, the Navy SEAL who had arrived at just the right moment, was enough to steady her shaking. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you. I've got you." She clutched his hand, leaning into him, and for the first time in what felt like hours, a small, tentative smile appeared amidst her tears. Even as the parade continued in the background, with music faintly playing and crowds still cheering, the moment crystallized in everyone's mind. Danger had struck. Fear had erupted, but courage, precision, and love had arrived even faster. My daughter had been rescued in the nick of time, a reminder that sometimes heroes appear exactly when you need them most, and that protection and skill can triumph over reckless arrogance in the blink of an eye. By the time the medics wheeled her away for further treatment, the chaos had begun to subside. Police took Karen into custody, and the crowd slowly returned to cheering for the parade, albeit nervously. My daughter looked up at me, then at her father, and whispered, I knew you'd come." Her voice was small, but the relief and trust behind it were enormous. He smiled gently, brushing her hair from her face. "I'll always come," he said. "Always." That day, the 4th of July, became more than a celebration of freedom. It became a story of courage, timing, and the unwavering protection of family in the face of unimaginable danger. And for my daughter, it became the D. She learned that even when chaos erupts, She would never face it alone. The chaos of the parade had faded into a tense stillness, replaced by the rapid, efficient movements of trained medics. My 12-year-old daughter lay on the stretcher, her small body trembling as the adrenaline from the attack began to give way to pain. Her red, white, and blue dress was stained with blood from the bullet wound in her shoulder, and she clutched it instinctively as though holding herself together could ease the pain. The medics moved quickly but gently, lifting her carefully to assess the wound, the urgency in their eyes matching the gravity of the situation. She whimpered softly, her small face contorted in fear and discomfort. The loud bang of the gunshot still echoed in her ears, mingling with the distant music and the murmur of the anxious crowd. Every second of that terrifying moment was etched in her memory. Her eyes searched frantically for a familiar face, and the sight of her father, the Navy SEAL who had appeared like a guardian angel, brought a fragile sense of relief. She reached out with trembling hands, gripping the uniformed sleeve of his dress jacket. "Daddy, it hurts," she whispered, barely audible. He crouched beside the stretcher, his strong hands resting lightly on her small shoulders, just enough to reassure her that she was no longer alone. His presence radiated calm authority, the kind that only comes from years of facing life-and-death situations. "I'm right here, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you. I've got you." She leaned into him, her body shaking, and he kept a protective arm around her as the medics began cleaning the wound. The lead medic, a woman with a calm yet focused expression, carefully examined the bullet wound. The pain was intense, and my daughter flinched at every touch, her small hand gripping the stretcher rails tightly. "It's superficial," the medic said, her tone reassuring yet factual. "We'll clean it, stop the bleeding, and get her patched up. She's going to be okay." The SEAL nodded, keeping his gaze on Karen, who was now restrained by officers and protesting loudly, but powerless. His focus never wavered from my daughter. I knelt beside the stretcher, holding her free hand, brushing her hair from her tear-streaked face. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "You're safe. Daddy's here. I'm here. You're going to be okay." Her tears flowed freely, tiny sobs escaping, but there was a flicker of trust in her eyes. She could feel the strength of her father beside her, the protective presence that had just saved her life. The fear in her chest slowly began to release in small, shaky breaths as the medics applied antiseptic and bandages. My daughter looked around at the crowd. Some onlookers had cameras, others were murmuring, and a few were visibly shaken, but none of that mattered to her now. She only saw the steady hands, the calm voice, and the unwavering presence of her father. He whispered small encouragements, soothing words that carried the weight of authority and love. "I've got you. Nothing will happen. You're safe. Just breathe, little one." The medics worked quickly, cleaning the blood from her dress and shoulder, applying sterile dressings and preparing her for transport to the hospital for further evaluation. The SEAL stayed beside her, his presence shielding her from the chaos, ensuring no one came near who didn't belong. My daughter clung to him with all her strength, her tiny fingers gripping his sleeve. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice quivering. He gently brushed her hair back and whispered, "It's okay to be scared. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." As they lifted her onto the ambulance stretcher, the crowd parted respectfully, sensing that this was a private, crucial moment. She gave a small nod to me, tears still streaming, and looked at her father. There was trust in that glance, the unspoken acknowledgement that he had saved her life and that his presence alone could shield her from the horrors of the day. The medics carefully wheeled her toward the ambulance, her small body shaking but beginning to calm as the protective aura of her father surrounded her. The SEAL walked alongside, his hand lightly resting on the stretcher, eyes scanning the crowd and surroundings to ensure there was no further threat. Karen's shouts and protests were now distant, irrelevant, contained by officers who recognized her reckless behavior. The crowd, once panicked, now watched in awe as the Navy SEAL calmly and decisively ensured the safety of the most vulnerable person in the chaos. Once inside the ambulance, my daughter was secured with seatbelts and straps to prevent further movement. She looked at her father, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, thank you for coming." He leaned close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'll always come. he replied, his tone firm yet tender. Always. The ambulance doors closed, and the vehicle began to move slowly through the crowded streets. My daughter's breathing gradually steadied, the initial panic giving way to relief. The SEAL remained at her side, hands ready, presence unwavering. For the first time that day, she felt truly safe. In that moment, amidst the lingering chaos of a parade that had turned into a near tragedy, she realized that danger could strike without warning. But love, skill, and courage could arrive even faster. By the time the ambulance reached the hospital, her tear-stained face had softened into a faint smile, one of tentative trust. She knew she was in good hands, and more importantly, she knew her father, the Navy SEAL, would not leave her side. He had come home early from a mission across the world just to protect her, and that knowledge gave her courage. This 4th of July would forever be etched in her memory, not for the music, not for the fireworks, not for the parade, but for the man who appeared when she needed him most, and for the unshakable safety of his presence. Back at home, the echoes of the parade still lingered like shadows over our street. The sounds of cheering, music, and celebration had faded into memory, but the terror of the shooting remained vividly imprinted in my daughter's mind. She sat curled up on the living room couch, her small frame shivering slightly as she clutched a soft blanket. Her red, white, and blue dress had been replaced with comfortable pajamas, but her shoulder was still bandaged. The bruise and tiny puncture wound a visible reminder of the danger she had just survived. Her big eyes, still wide with lingering fear, flicked nervously toward every corner of the room. My husband, still in uniform from the parade, remained at her side. Even though the bullet wound was not life-threatening, the psychological trauma had left her visibly shaken. He sat beside her on the couch, his strong hand resting gently over hers, his presence radiating calm and assurance. Every inch of him screamed safety and protection. He whispered quietly, his voice soft but steady, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Nothing can hurt you. I'm right here and I won't let anything happen." She clung to his arm as if it were a lifeline, the tension in her body slowly beginning to ease with each reassuring word. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she recounted what she could remember from the parade. Her words were hesitant, broken, interrupted by sobs and small gasps. I was on the float, and she shot me, Daddy. I was so scared." Her voice trembled as the Ori replayed in her mind. My husband leaned in closer, brushing her hair away from her face. "I know, baby," he said softly. "I know it was scary. But look at me, you're safe now. I've got you. Nothing like that will happen again." The intensity of his gaze, calm but commanding, gave her something she had not felt since the moment the gunshot rang out. Absolute safety. We sat together in silence for a few moments, listening to the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the faint chirping of birds outside. Slowly, my daughter's breathing began to steady. The shaking in her small hands lessened as she pressed them into the warmth of her father's arms. He whispered little things, stories of bravery, tales from his missions, and gentle jokes to coax a small smile onto her tear-streaked face. She let out a shaky giggle, the first sign of light returning after a dark day. I brought her favorite stuffed animal over, a soft teddy bear with a red bow, and placed it in her lap. She hugged it tightly, and for the first time since the attack, her tiny body relaxed slightly. My husband adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, making sure she was comfortable and warm. He explained that while the bullet wound would heal physically, it was normal to feel scared after such a traumatic event. "Fear is okay," he said, "but courage is trusting those who love and protect you. You were brave, and you are safe now." She nodded, a small flicker of understanding shining in her eyes. Hours passed slowly, the afternoon sun moving across the living room floor as we stayed by her side. My husband's steady presence became her anchor. Every time she flinched at a sudden noise, a car door slamming, a distant shout, he reassured her, holding her hand and guiding her attention back to something safe and familiar. He encouraged her to talk about her feelings, asking gentle questions about what scared her most, and helping her name those fears so they could be faced and understood, rather than ignored. We decided to make the evening comforting and normal. I brought over coloring books and crayons, and my daughter began drawing flowers and butterflies, her small hands shaky but purposeful. My husband watched over her, making small comments about her artwork, encouraging her creativity, and gently helping her keep the crayons steady when her hand shook. Slowly, the fear began to fade into focus, concentration, and the joy of creating something beautiful again. The rhythmic motion of coloring helped her body calm. Her breathing became more even, and her eyes sparkled slightly once more. As dinner approached, my husband suggested a small reward for bravery, her favorite chocolate pudding, which he served to her in a tiny bowl. She giggled at the mess it made as she dug in, her small hands sticky but eager. We laughed softly together, a warm contrast to the morning's terror. Each laugh, each small smile, was a tiny victory, a reminder that trauma can be softened by love, presence, and safety. Before bedtime, my husband carried her carefully to her bedroom, her small body now relaxed and drowsy. He tucked her in, ensuring her blankets were snug, her favorite teddy bear beside her, and a small night light casting a warm glow across the room. "Sleep well, little one," he whispered. "You are safe, you are loved, and I will always be here to protect you." Her eyelids drooped, the tension of the day finally giving way to rest, and she drifted into a peaceful sleep in the arms of a world that felt safe again. That night, my husband and I sat quietly in the living room, reflecting on the day's events. Fear had struck, danger had erupted, but love, courage, and vigilance had prevailed. My daughter had learned an important lesson. Even when terror appears suddenly and unexpectedly, the presence of those who love and protect her could transform fear into reassurance, chaos into calm. That 4th of July would be remembered not for the shot fired, not for the parade chaos, but for the unwavering safety, love, and recovery that followed. Proof that even after the worst moments, healing, comfort, and emotional recovery are possible. The morning after the parade, the neighborhood was quiet, almost eerily so. The excitement and chaos of the previous day had vanished, replaced by the low hum of distant traffic and the occasional chirp of birds. But for our family, the echoes of yesterday were far from gone. My 12-year-old daughter was awake early, still cautious, still hesitant, but calmer than she had been. She moved slowly in her wheelchair across the living room, her shoulder wrapped carefully in a clean bandage. The scarred red mark on her skin served as a physical reminder of the danger she had faced, and her eyes occasionally flicked toward the door as if expecting danger to appear again. We sat together at the breakfast table, my husband in uniform, still maintaining the commanding, protective presence he had displayed all day yesterday. The kitchen was quiet, filled with the soft morning light filtering through the blinds. My daughter hesitated, then spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Daddy, will she get in trouble?" The words were small, but the weight behind them was immense. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was processing the injustice she had endured. He reached across the table, resting his large hand over hers. "Yes," he said calmly but firmly. "Karen will be held accountable. What she did was illegal and dangerous. She endangered you, and she needs to understand that actions like that have consequences. The authorities are handling it now. You don't need to worry about it. Your job is to recover and feel safe." His gaze met hers, steady, unwavering, a blend of reassurance and resolve. "You don't deserve to be hurt. No one ever does." I joined in, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, it's okay to feel angry or scared. What happened wasn't your fault. It was hers. And the important thing is that you're safe now, and people who are trained to protect you, who love you, are here." She nodded slowly, absorbing the words. The sense of vulnerability lingered, but it was paired with a growing understanding of protection, justice, and accountability. Later that morning, the police arrived at our home to take formal statements. My husband stayed by our daughter's side, holding her hand, guiding her through each question gently, helping her answer honestly without fear. The officers were professional but firm, documenting Karen's reckless behavior. They spoke of potential charges: assault with a deadly weapon, endangerment, reckless conduct. My daughter listened quietly, eyes wide, realizing that consequences were real and that justice had a voice. As the day progressed, we reflected together on what had happened. My daughter's small voice spoke up repeatedly, asking questions about rules, fairness, and why someone could be so mean. My husband answered carefully, teaching lessons of discernment and resilience. "Some people act out of anger, fear, or selfishness," he said. "It doesn't make it right. It's our responsibility to act with courage, to protect ourselves and others, and to trust the authorities to handle those who do harm. She nodded, absorbing the life lessons wrapped inside the painful story. By afternoon, we decided to take a short outing to the park, carefully selecting a quiet corner away from crowds. The sun shone gently, and my daughter pushed her wheelchair slowly along the paths, learning once again that the world could be safe when approached with awareness. My husband and I walked alongside her, pointing out flowers, clouds, and small birds, emphasizing calm and trust. The fear that had gripped her the day before gradually softened with each reassuring step, each smile shared between father and daughter. We spoke openly about accountability and justice. My daughter asked if Karen would apologize, if she would ever understand how wrong her actions were. My husband's eyes softened as he replied, "She will face consequences, and hopefully, she will learn. But sometimes people don't change. What matters is that we act with integrity, and we protect ourselves and the people we love. And today you are safe, stronger, and braver than before." Later, we documented everything for the HOA and the police, photos of her injury, written accounts of the incident, and statements from witnesses. My daughter helped where she could, her small hands steadying the papers or handing pens, slowly reclaiming her sense of agency. Each signature, each recorded statement, was a step toward justice and empowerment. The world had tried to instill fear, but together, we were rewriting the narrative into one of safety, accountability, and strength. By evening, she was back at home, quietly coloring in her favorite book. Her shoulder was resting comfortably, her breathing steady. She occasionally looked up at her father and me, a faint, cautious smile forming. "Daddy, I feel safe now," she said softly. His hand covered hers once more, warmth and reassurance radiating through the simple touch. "That's right," he said gently. "You are safe, and no one can take that away from you, not ever." That night, as she drifted off to sleep, wrapped in blankets and the comfort of home, we knew the events of the day had left a lasting impact, but not in fear. Instead, she had learned that even when danger appeared without warning, protection, courage, and accountability were always possible. The lessons of bravery, justice, and safety had been taught firsthand, and she would carry them forever stronger and more aware than she had ever been. Even as the neighborhood continued its quiet, ordinary evening, the story of that 4th of July, an attempted act of recklessness and cruelty, was no longer just a memory of fear. It had transformed into a lesson of accountability, vigilance, and the extraordinary power of love, presence, and courage to protect the most vulnerable. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, casting warm golden light across the living room. The house felt calm, safe, and ordinary again, a stark contrast to the chaos and fear of the previous day. My 12-year-old daughter, her shoulders still wrapped but healing well, sat in her wheelchair at the breakfast table, slowly enjoying her favorite cereal. The faint scar from the bullet wound was visible, but her bright eyes sparkled with a mixture of cautious curiosity and emerging confidence. She looked at her father, who sat across from her in uniform, and offered a small smile. "Good morning, little one," he said softly, his tone calm yet full of pride. "How are we feeling today?" She hesitated, then shrugged lightly. "Better, I think. I still feel a little scared, but not like yesterday." Her words were tentative, but the strength behind them was undeniable. She had endured fear, chaos, and pain, yet she was already taking the first steps toward reclaiming her confidence. My husband reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's natural," he said gently. "It takes time to feel completely safe after something scary. But every day, little by little, you're moving forward. You're learning courage, and you're learning that danger doesn't last forever. Love and protection do." She nodded, absorbing his words, the familiar sense of safety settling over her like a soft blanket. We spent the morning quietly together as a family. I helped her with schoolwork at the dining table, while her father reviewed schedules and plans for the week. Occasionally, she would glance up at him, seeking reassurance, and he would respond with a warm smile, a nod, or a gentle hand resting on hers. His presence had been unwavering throughout the ordeal, and it continued to serve as her anchor as she navigated the aftermath of the traumatic events. Later, we decided to take a short outing to the nearby park, a place where her wheelchair could move freely without restrictions. The sun was high, the sky bright, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and flowers. She hesitated at first, gripping her father's hand tightly as we approached the walking path. But as she felt the wind against her face, heard the birds singing, and saw other children playing at a safe distance, a smile slowly formed on her lips. "Daddy, it's nice out here," she said softly, spinning her wheelchair slowly to watch the swaying trees. He nodded, his voice low and steady. "It's beautiful, isn't it? And you're safe. That's what matters most. You can enjoy this day without worry." He let her explore, following her closely but allowing her to lead. Every turn of her wheels, every glance at the ducks on the pond was a small victory, an assertion that life would continue and joy would return. As the day progressed, we reflected together on the past events. She asked questions, hesitating but determined, about why someone would act with such recklessness and cruelty. My husband explained with patience and care, sometimes people let anger, jealousy, or selfishness control them. It doesn't make it right. But what matters is how we respond. We protect ourselves and those we love, we ensure justice is done, and we continue living our lives bravely, without fear holding us back. We spent the afternoon painting together in the park, her favorite activity. She chose bright colors for her paper, her hands steady and careful, occasionally looking at her father for encouragement. Each brushstroke was more than just art, it was a reclaiming of her world, a small act of defiance against fear. I watched as she laughed at a small spill of paint on the edge of her wheelchair, the sound light and carefree, the kind of laughter that fills a house or park with warmth. By evening, we returned home. The neighborhood had returned to its usual quiet rhythm, and Karen's presence had been officially removed from our community by the authorities. The police confirmed charges and restrictions, ensuring she could not threaten us again. Knowing that justice was being served, my daughter felt an additional layer of relief and safety. She curled up on the couch with a blanket and her favorite book, her father sitting beside her, reading quietly but keeping one hand lightly resting on hers. Dinner was calm and full of quiet conversation. She shared small details about her day, about her art, and the way the wind had felt in the park. Her words were confident, her tone measured, reflecting a growing sense of control over her own life. She had faced danger and survived, and now she was learning to move forward without fear dominating her world. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, she looked at her father and whispered, "Daddy, thank you for everything." He bent down, brushing her hair gently from her forehead, and smiled. "I'll always be here," he said softly. "Always, no matter what. You are safe, you are loved, and you are brave. Remember that every day." She nodded, pulling her blanket close, and drifted off to sleep peacefully for the first time since the incident. In that quiet house, the soft hum of the night surrounding us, we realized something important. Life would continue. Joy would return. Safety could be restored, and even in the face of recklessness or danger, love, courage, and vigilance could create a world where fear did not rule. My daughter had learned the value of resilience, the power of protection, and the certainty that she was never alone. The 4th of July would always be remembered, not for chaos or fear, but for the family who stood together, the courage that never wavered, and the lessons of bravery and safety that would last a lifetime. And as she slept, I knew that tomorrow she would wake up ready to live, to laugh, and to enjoy her world with renewed confidence, safe in the knowledge that she was loved, protected, and unstoppable.